"Get out and never come back," my parents said. So I left without a word. 3 months later, Dad texted me, "Why haven't you paid the mortgage?" I replied, "I thought I wasn't welcome." Then my phone exploded. My name is Madison and I'm 26 years old. For 3 years, I believed that being a good daughter meant sacrificing everything for family. I worked 2 jobs, paid their mortgage, and never complained when they criticized my choices. I thought family loyalty meant everything until the night my parents screamed those devastating words that shattered my world completely. They told me to get out and never come back. So, I did exactly that. But 3 months later, when my phone buzzed with a desperate message, I realized who really needed whom. Before I share what happened next, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. Now, let me tell you how walking away from my family became the best decision I ever made. Growing up in a modest suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, I always prided myself on being the responsible one. My father, Richard, worked long shifts at a local manufacturing plant, his hands permanently stained with motor oil and his back aching from years of manual labor. My mother, Patricia, worked part-time as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm, though her chronic migraines often kept her home for days at a time. Then there was my younger brother, Lucas, 3 years my junior, who seemed to glide through life with the kind of effortless charm that made everything appear easy. From childhood, I naturally fell into the role of the peacekeeper. While Lucas would throw tantrums or rebel against household rules, I smoothed over conflicts and made sure everyone felt heard. When my parents argued about money, which happened frequently, I would distract Lucas with games or homework help. Teachers loved me because I never caused trouble, turned in every assignment on time, and genuinely enjoyed learning. My report cards were filled with A's and glowing comments about my maturity and helpfulness. The first time I contributed financially to our household was during my senior year of high school. Richard's hours had been cut due to company downsizing, and Patricia's health issues meant she missed more work than usual. Without anyone asking, I picked up a part-time job at a local grocery store, working evenings and weekends. When I handed my parents my first paycheck, minus a small amount I kept for gas and school supplies, the relief on their faces made my chest swell with pride. "Madison, honey, you don't have to do this," Patricia had said, but her fingers clutched the check tightly. "I want to help," I replied, meaning every word. "We're a family. We take care of each other." That became my mantra throughout college. While other students worried about student loans and part-time jobs for spending money, I worked to help support my family. I chose a state school close to home, lived in the cheapest dorm I could find, and sent money home whenever possible. My parents would call to thank me, telling neighbors and relatives about their responsible, mature daughter who never forgot where she came from. After graduation, moving back home felt natural. I had landed a decent job as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized company, and Lucas was starting his sophomore year at a university about 2 hours away. The arrangement seemed perfect. I could save money on rent while helping my family through what I assumed was a temporary rough patch. The mortgage payment was $1,847 monthly. When my parents approached me about taking it over, they seemed almost embarrassed to ask. Richard explained that between his reduced hours and Patricia's ongoing health problems, they were struggling to keep up with all their obligations. "Just until we get back on our feet," Patricia assured me. "Maybe 6 months, a year at most." I agreed without hesitation. Along with the mortgage, I gradually took over the utility bills, grocery shopping, and various household expenses. To make ends meet, I picked up a second job working weekends at a clothing store in the mall. Between both jobs, I was working nearly 60 hours a week, but seeing my parents' stress diminish made every exhausting day worth it. My daily routine became a carefully choreographed dance of responsibility. I would wake at 5:30, exercise briefly in our basement, shower, and grab coffee before heading to my primary job. During lunch breaks, I paid bills online or handled family-related errands. After work, I would grocery shop, pick up Patricia's prescriptions, or drive her to medical appointments when Richard couldn't leave work early. Evenings were spent cooking dinner twice a week, helping with household chores, and trying to maintain some semblance of a social life. The validation I received felt intoxicating. Neighbors would comment on what a wonderful daughter I was, how lucky my parents were to have such a responsible child. Extended family members praised my maturity and selflessness during holiday gatherings. My parents seemed genuinely grateful, often mentioning my contributions to friends and coworkers. "Madison has been such a blessing," Patricia would say during church functions. "I don't know what we would do without her." As months passed, the temporary arrangement became permanent, though nobody explicitly discussed it. When Lucas needed textbooks that cost $400, I covered them without being asked. When the family car needed $800 in repairs, I handled that, too. Emergency expenses, from medical co-pays to appliance replacements, automatically became my responsibility. I told myself this was what family meant. This was how love looked in action. While friends my age were traveling, dating, or pursuing graduate degrees, I was building something meaningful, a foundation of security for the people I loved most. My apartment fund became the family emergency fund. My vacation savings became Lucas's textbook money. My retirement contributions became household repairs. The pride I felt seemed justified by everyone's reactions. My parents bragged about me to their friends. Lucas appreciated his financial freedom to focus on studies, and I felt genuinely important. For the first time in my life, I was indispensable. My contributions mattered in tangible, measurable ways. Looking back, I can see how gradually the dynamics shifted. But at the time, everything felt natural and right. I was the successful daughter, the responsible one, the family's financial backbone. My identity became completely intertwined with my ability to provide and sacrifice. I measured my worth by how much I could give, how many problems I could solve, and how grateful my family seemed. What I didn't realize was that gratitude can transform into expectation so slowly that you don't notice until it's completely gone. The shift in my family's attitude toward me happened so gradually that I initially dismissed it as my imagination. It started with small comments that seemed harmless enough but left me feeling vaguely unsettled. During one of our usual Sunday dinners, Patricia mentioned a coworker's daughter who had just gotten engaged. "She's only 24, but she's got her whole life figured out," she said, glancing at me meaningfully. "Some girls know how to balance career and personal life." The implication stung, but I brushed it off. A few weeks later, Richard made an offhand comment about my work schedule. "You know, Madison, all work and no play makes for a pretty dull life. When's the last time you went on a date?" I had been on exactly 2 dates in the past year, both arranged by well-meaning coworkers. Both had ended early because I was exhausted from working 2 jobs and couldn't focus on conversation that didn't revolve around immediate responsibilities. But how could I explain that I barely had time for sleep, let alone romance? "I'm just focused on building my career right now," I replied. The standard answer I gave everyone who questioned my single status. "That's what worries us," Patricia said, her voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before. "You're 25 years old, living at home with no social life. It's not healthy." The irony was suffocating. I was living at home because I was paying their mortgage. I had no social life because I was working extra hours to cover their expenses. But somehow these facts had been twisted into character flaws rather than sacrifices. The criticism escalated during family dinners, which had always been sacred time for our family. Lucas would share stories about his college friends, his internship prospects, his social activities, and our parents would listen with rapt attention. When I tried to share achievements from work or interesting projects I was developing, the response was polite but distant. "That's nice, honey," Richard would say before immediately changing the subject to Lucas's latest accomplishment or asking Patricia about her day. I began to feel like a background character in my own family story. My contributions were acknowledged only when bills needed paying, but my thoughts, dreams, and experiences seemed to hold little interest for anyone. The comparison game became a regular occurrence. During one particularly painful dinner, Patricia spent 20 minutes praising Lucas's girlfriend, a psychology major who was so well-rounded and really going places. She detailed the girl's internship, her volunteer work, her study abroad plans. "Now that's a girl who knows how to make the most of her opportunities," Patricia concluded. "She's not letting life pass her by." The unspoken message was clear. Unlike me, this girl was living correctly. She wasn't trapped in a cycle of work and responsibility. She was experiencing the world, taking risks, building a future that extended beyond paying bills. When I mentioned feeling overwhelmed with my workload and suggested reducing my retail hours to focus on advancing at my primary job, the reaction was swift and sharp. "Well, nobody forced you to take on so much responsibility," Patricia said, her voice cold in a way that made my stomach drop. "You made these choices yourself." The statement was technically true, but completely missed the context. Yes, I had chosen to help them, but that choice was made out of love and family loyalty. Hearing it framed as my personal decision that I shouldn't complain about felt like a betrayal of everything I thought we had built together. Richard began making comments about my lifestyle choices that felt increasingly judgmental. When I bought myself a new jacket after months of deliberation, he made a pointed remark about some people having money to throw around. When I mentioned considering a small vacation with Emma, he wondered aloud about people who could afford to be irresponsible with their finances. These comments were particularly painful because I was incredibly careful with money. Every purchase was considered and reconsidered. I bought generic groceries, shopped sales for clothing, and hadn't been to a movie theater in over a year. Yet somehow, I was being painted as frivolous and self-indulgent. The double standard became impossible to ignore. Lucas could spend money on video games, nights out with friends, and spring break trips without anyone questioning his financial priorities. When he bought an expensive new laptop for school, our parents celebrated his investment in his future. When I bought a $10 book, Richard made comments about unnecessary spending. My parents began treating me more like a paying tenant than a beloved daughter. They made plans without consulting me, even for family events I had traditionally been included in. When they decided to rearrange the living room, they didn't ask for my input despite the fact that I spent my evenings there and was paying for the house. "It's our house," Patricia said when I asked about the new furniture arrangement. The possessive pronoun felt like a slap after years of paying their mortgage. The emotional distance grew wider each week. My parents stopped asking about my day with genuine interest. They no longer praised my work achievements or seemed proud of my professional growth. The warm appreciation I had once felt from them was replaced by a kind of grudging tolerance, as if my presence in their home was an inconvenience they had to endure. The most painful realization was that they seemed to be actively encouraging me to leave. Comments about independence, suggestions that I was too comfortable living at home, and pointed questions about my future living arrangements became regular topics of conversation. I began to question everything. Had I misunderstood our arrangement? Were they feeling burdened by my presence despite my financial contributions? Was I actually helping them? Or was I imposing myself on their lives in ways I hadn't recognized? The seeds of doubt that these interactions planted would soon grow into a forest of confusion and hurt that would change everything between us forever. The tension in our house became so thick you could cut it with a knife, but I kept telling myself that it was temporary stress from external factors. Maybe Richard was worried about job security, or Patricia's health was bothering her more than she admitted. I clung to these explanations because accepting the alternative meant confronting the possibility that my family genuinely didn't want me around. The breaking point began building when my parents announced their plans to redecorate the house. They had been talking about updating the living room and kitchen for months, discussing paint colors and furniture styles with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen from them in years. "We've saved up enough to finally make this place feel like home again," Patricia said excitedly, showing me magazine clippings of modern furniture sets and color schemes. I was happy for them until I realized what saved up actually meant. They expected me to fund the $3,500 renovation project while being completely excluded from any design decisions. "We've already picked everything out," Richard explained when I asked about the budget. "We just need you to cover the costs since you're so good with managing money." The casual assumption that I would pay for improvements to a house where I was increasingly unwelcome felt like being slapped. When I hesitantly asked if I could have input on choices that would affect the common areas where I spent my time, Patricia's response was swift and cutting. "It's our house, Madison. We've lived here for 28 years. I think we know what we want." The possessive language stung, especially since I had been paying their mortgage for almost 2 years at that point. But rather than argue, I agreed to fund their project, telling myself that happy parents would mean a more peaceful household. Around the same time, my career was reaching a crucial turning point. My manager had approached me about a promotion opportunity that would involve additional training, longer hours initially, and eventually a significant salary increase. It was exactly the kind of advancement I had been working toward, but it would require reducing my weekend retail job to accommodate the extra responsibilities. When I mentioned this opportunity during dinner, expecting some family celebration of my professional growth, the reaction was immediate and hostile. "So, you're planning to abandon your family responsibilities for your career?" Richard asked, his voice heavy with accusation. "It's not abandoning anything," I protested. "It's a chance to advance professionally, which would ultimately benefit everyone." "Sounds pretty selfish to me," Patricia added. "We depend on that income, Madison. You can't just decide to make less money because you want a fancier job title." Their response revealed everything about how they viewed my role in the family. I wasn't their daughter pursuing her dreams. I was their income source threatening to reduce profits. The promotion wasn't a celebration-worthy achievement. It was an inconvenience to their financial planning. Lucas came home for spring break during this time, and his presence only amplified the existing tensions. While I was working 60-hour weeks and funding household improvements, he was planning an expensive trip to Cancun with his fraternity brothers. "Mom and Dad said they could help with the trip costs," he mentioned casually while I was cooking dinner. "It's important for networking and building relationships that could help my career later." I watched my parents hand him $800 for what was essentially a party vacation while they had criticized me for considering a professional advancement opportunity. The double standard was so blatant that I couldn't ignore it anymore. The situation worsened when Emma visited for a weekend. I had been so isolated by my work schedule and family obligations that I rarely saw friends anymore. So, her visit felt like a rare opportunity to reconnect with my social life. Emma immediately noticed the family dynamics during her stay. At dinner, she watched my parents praise Lucas extensively for his academic performance and social activities while barely acknowledging my work achievements. When I mentioned a successful marketing campaign I had developed, Richard changed the subject within 30 seconds to ask Lucas about his internship applications. Madison has been such a support to this family, Emma said, trying to redirect attention to my contributions. It's amazing how she manages 2 jobs and still helps with everything around here. The silence that followed her comment was deafening. My parents exchanged glances that I couldn't interpret, and Lucas suddenly became very interested in his food. Later that evening, Emma pulled me aside for a private conversation that would prove to be a turning point. I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer, she said gently. Do you feel appreciated in this house? The question hit me like a physical blow because it forced me to confront feelings I had been suppressing for months. Of course, I replied automatically. They're my family. That's not what I asked, Emma pressed. Do you feel appreciated? Do they treat you like someone they're grateful to have around, or like someone they expect things from? Her words planted seeds of doubt that I couldn't shake. That night, after Emma went to sleep, I lay awake replaying months of interactions through this new lens. When had my parents last thanked me for my contributions? When had they last asked about my goals, my dreams, my happiness? When had they last treated me like a daughter rather than a resource? The most devastating realization came 2 days after Emma left. I was coming back from grocery shopping when I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen, apparently unaware that I had returned. I wish Madison would just move out already, Patricia was saying. She acts like she owns this place just because she pays some bills. I know, Richard agreed. She's becoming a burden with all her opinions about everything, and lately she's been so moody and difficult to be around. Maybe we should start encouraging her more directly to find her own place, Patricia suggested. She's 26 years old. It's not normal for her to still be living here. I stood frozen in the hallway, grocery bags cutting into my hands as my world crumbled around me. The people I had sacrificed everything for saw me as a burden. The family I had supported financially and emotionally for years wished I would disappear. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to have a conversation about boundaries, mutual respect, and what our family relationship actually meant to all of us. I had no idea that this conversation would explode into something that would destroy everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. I spent 3 days planning what I would say to my family. I wrote down key points, practiced different approaches, and tried to anticipate their responses. I wanted to address the growing tension while maintaining respect for everyone involved. I genuinely believed that honest communication could fix whatever had gone wrong between us. I chose Sunday dinner as the time for our conversation, thinking that the familiar setting would help keep things calm and productive. Lucas was home for the weekend, so we would all be together. I prepared my favorite pasta dish, set the table nicely, and tried to create an atmosphere that would encourage open dialogue. I'd like to talk to you all about something that's been bothering me, I began after we had finished eating. My voice was steady, my tone respectful. I've been feeling like there's some tension in our family lately, and I think we should address it before it gets worse. The reaction was immediate and cold. Richard set down his fork and crossed his arms while Patricia's expression shifted to something I had never seen before, pure annoyance. What kind of tension? Richard asked, his voice already defensive. I feel like I've been walking on eggshells around here, I continued carefully. I love this family and I want to help, but lately it seems like nothing I do is appreciated. I'd like us to talk about how we can communicate better and make sure everyone feels valued. Valued? Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. Madison, we've given you a roof over your head for 26 years. We raised you, fed you, clothed you, paid for your education, and you're sitting here talking about feeling undervalued. Her response caught me completely off guard. This wasn't the direction I had expected the conversation to take. I'm not talking about the past, I said, trying to stay calm. I'm grateful for everything you've done for me. I'm talking about now, about how we interact as adults. I feel like my contributions to this family aren't appreciated, and I'd like to understand why that is. Your contributions? Richard's voice was rising. What contributions? You mean paying some bills, Madison? That's called being an adult. That's called taking responsibility for yourself instead of freeloading off your parents forever. The word freeloading hit me like a physical blow. I had been working 2 jobs to support this family for over 2 years, and he was calling me a freeloader. I've been paying your mortgage for 2 years, I said, my voice starting to shake. I pay for groceries, utilities, Lucas's textbooks, car repairs, medical co-pays. How is that freeloading? Nobody asked you to do that, Patricia snapped. Those were your choices, Madison. You decided to take on all that responsibility, and now you're trying to use it to control us. Control you? I was genuinely confused. How am I trying to control anyone? You act like you own this place, Lucas chimed in, speaking for the first time. You have opinions about everything. You act like we owe you something, and you make everyone feel guilty whenever they spend money. The betrayal from my younger brother, whose education I had been partially funding, cut deeper than anything my parents had said. I don't understand, I said, tears starting to form. I thought I was helping. I thought we were a team. A team? Richard stood up, his face flushed with anger. Madison, you're 26 years old with no life, no boyfriend, no friends, living in your parents' house, and acting like a martyr because you choose to pay bills instead of building your own life. Each word felt like a knife. They were attacking not just my contributions, but my entire existence, my life choices, my character. You want to know the truth? Patricia said, standing up as well. You're selfish, Madison. You hide behind this family responsibility nonsense because you're too scared to live your own life. You use money to make yourself feel important and necessary because you don't have anything else going for you. You're manipulative, Richard added. You've made yourself so involved in our finances that we feel guilty for making any decisions without you. That's not love, Madison. That's emotional blackmail. I tried to defend myself, to explain that I had only wanted to help, that every contribution had been given freely out of love. But my words were drowned out by their continued attacks. You want to know what we really think? Patricia's voice was cruel now, sharper than I had ever heard it. We think you're pathetic. You're 26 years old, and your entire identity revolves around being needed by your family. You don't have hobbies, interests, or goals that don't involve us. It's unhealthy, and frankly, it's exhausting. You make everyone walk on eggshells, Lucas added. We can't enjoy anything without feeling like we have to justify it to you. We can't make plans without considering your schedule. We can't have conversations without you inserting yourself into every decision. I don't do that, I protested weakly, but even as I said it, I wondered if they were right. Had I become too involved? Had my desire to help crossed into controlling behavior? You absolutely do, Richard said. And we're tired of it. We're tired of feeling guilty for living our own lives in our own house. This is my house, too, I said. The words coming out more forcefully than I intended. I pay the mortgage. I pay the bills. I have a right to be involved in decisions that affect me. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents looked at each other, and I saw something pass between them that I couldn't interpret. Actually, Patricia said slowly, that's exactly the problem. You think paying bills gives you ownership. You think contributing money makes you entitled to control our decisions. That's not how family works, Madison. Then how does family work? I asked, genuinely confused and hurt because I thought it meant supporting each other and being grateful for help when times are tough. Family, Richard said coldly, works when everyone respects boundaries and lives their own lives instead of trying to control others through financial manipulation. The accusation of manipulation was the final straw. After years of sacrifice, after giving up my own opportunities and dreams to help them, they were accusing me of manipulation. Fine, I said, standing up from the table. If that's how you feel, maybe I should just leave. I expected them to protest, to apologize, to realize they had gone too far. Instead, my parents exchanged another look, and Patricia spoke words that would haunt me forever. Actually, yes. Maybe you should. You're 26 years old, Madison. It's time you learned to live independently instead of hiding behind family obligations. The room spun around me. They weren't just failing to stop me from leaving. They were encouraging it. You want me to leave? I asked, barely able to form the words. We think it would be best for everyone, Richard said. You need to build your own life instead of living vicariously through ours. And we need space to be a family without feeling like we're being watched and judged all the time. Lucas nodded in agreement, and that betrayal felt like the final nail in the coffin of everything I had believed about our family. You're ungrateful, Richard shouted when I didn't respond immediately. Get out and never come back. We don't need your guilt trips or your money anymore. The words echoed in the silence that followed. My entire family had just told me to leave and never return. The people I had sacrificed everything for had just rejected me completely. I looked at each of their faces, searching for any sign of regret or hesitation. Instead, I saw relief. They wanted me gone. Okay, I said quietly. I'll leave. And for the first time in the conversation, I meant every word I said. The calm acceptance in my voice seemed to surprise everyone, including myself. I think they expected me to break down, to beg for forgiveness, or to promise to change my behavior. Instead, I simply nodded and said, I'll pack my things. I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom with steady steps, though my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The room looked the same as it had the day before, my marketing textbooks on the desk, photos from college with Emma on the dresser, the lavender comforter my mother had bought me for my 16th birthday. But everything felt different now, like I was seeing it all through a stranger's eyes. I pulled 2 suitcases from my closet and began packing methodically. Essential clothes, important documents, my laptop, a few sentimental items. I left behind furniture, most of my books, kitchen appliances I had purchased, and decorations I had accumulated over the years. Those things belonged to a life I was apparently no longer welcome to live. The most surreal part was the silence from downstairs. No one came to check on me, to apologize, or to suggest we try to work things out. I could hear the low murmur of conversation and occasional laughter, as if nothing significant had just happened. As if their daughter and sister hadn't just been banished from the family. Lucas actually came upstairs as I was loading my car. "Need help with anything?" he asked casually, as if I were moving out under normal circumstances. "I've got it," I replied, not trusting myself to say more. He helped carry my computer bag to the car, making small talk about the weather and his upcoming finals. The normalcy of his behavior was more painful than outright hostility would have been. This was just a regular moving day to him, not a family destruction. I left my house key on the kitchen counter and walked out without saying goodbye. My parents were in the living room, and I could see them through the doorway, but they didn't acknowledge my departure. The sound of the front door closing behind me felt final in a way that made my chest tight. Emma welcomed me into her apartment without question, asking only if I was safe and if I needed anything immediate. That first night, I lay on her couch staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the confrontation. I kept expecting my phone to ring with an apology, an explanation, or at least acknowledgement that something terrible had just happened to our family. The phone never rang. The first few weeks were devastating in ways I hadn't anticipated. I cried at random moments, in grocery stores when I saw pasta sauce that reminded me of family dinners, at work when coworkers asked about weekend plans that used to involve family time, at night when the absence of familiar voices and sounds made Emma's apartment feel like a foreign country. But something unexpected began happening alongside the grief. For the first time in years, I had money left over after paying my bills. Without the mortgage, utilities, groceries for 4 people, and constant family emergencies, my paychecks actually covered my expenses with room to spare. I could afford to buy organic groceries without calculating costs. I could replace my worn-out work clothes without guilt. I could consider buying coffee from the shop near my office instead of making it at home to save $3 a day. These small luxuries felt almost shameful at first, like I was betraying my former values about financial responsibility. My work performance improved dramatically without the constant stress of family obligations. I no longer had to leave early for Patricia's doctor appointments or take calls during meetings about household emergencies. I could focus entirely on my projects, attend networking events after work, and pursue the professional development opportunities I had been putting off. My manager noticed the change immediately. "You seem different lately," she said during my performance review. "More confident, more engaged. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." I started therapy to process what had happened, partly because Emma gently suggested it and partly because I genuinely couldn't understand how my family relationships had deteriorated so completely. My therapist, Dr. Chin, introduced me to concepts I had never heard before: parentification, codependency, emotional manipulation. "It sounds like you took on adult responsibilities very young," she explained during one of our sessions. "That can create unhealthy family dynamics where your value becomes tied to what you provide rather than who you are." Through therapy, I began to understand that my family's treatment of me wasn't a sudden personality change, but the result of patterns that had been developing for years. They had become accustomed to my support without reciprocating emotional care. I had enabled their dependence while sacrificing my own growth and independence. 3 months passed without any contact from my family. I created new routines, developed friendships with coworkers, and started exploring hobbies I had abandoned years earlier. I took a painting class, joined a book club, and even went on a few dates with a colleague who made me laugh and treated me like I was worth pursuing. My new apartment was small, but entirely mine. I chose the furniture, the colors, the decorations. I cooked meals I enjoyed instead of trying to please everyone else's preferences. I watched movies I wanted to see, listened to music I liked, and made decisions based on my own desires rather than family obligations. The independence was intoxicating. I had forgotten what it felt like to live for myself, to make choices based on my own needs and wants. I started saving money for goals that had nothing to do with anyone else: a vacation to Europe, a graduate degree, a down payment on a house of my own. But the most surprising change was how little I missed the constant drama and criticism that had characterized my family life. I hadn't realized how much emotional energy I had been spending on managing other people's feelings and reactions. Without that burden, I felt lighter and more optimistic than I had in years. I was building a life that belonged entirely to me. And for the first time, I was genuinely happy, which made what happened next all the more revealing about the true nature of my family's feelings toward me. I was grocery shopping on a Tuesday evening, 3 months and 2 weeks after leaving my family home, when my phone buzzed with a text message. The sight of my father's name on the screen made my stomach drop. For a moment, I considered ignoring it entirely, but curiosity won. The message was brief and to the point: "Why haven't you paid the mortgage?" I stared at those 6 words for a full minute, standing in the pasta aisle of the grocery store as the full implications sank in. Not "how are you" or "we miss you" or "can we talk," just a demand to know why I hadn't sent money. The text revealed everything about their true motivations for our reconciliation. They didn't want their daughter back. They wanted their ATM machine back. I took a screenshot of the message and sent it to Emma with a caption: "Apparently, I was never actually unwelcome, just temporarily inconvenient." Then I crafted my response carefully: "I thought I wasn't welcome anymore." My phone rang within 30 seconds. "Madison." Richard's voice was different than it had been during our confrontation. Gone was the anger and righteousness. Now there was panic and something that almost sounded like desperation. "Dad," I said calmly, leaning against my shopping cart. "We need to talk," he said. "There's been some misunderstanding about what happened that night." "What kind of misunderstanding?" I asked, genuinely curious about how he would explain this. "We didn't mean for you to actually leave permanently," he said, the words tumbling out quickly. "We were all upset, saying things we didn't mean. You know how family arguments can get." "Actually, I don't," I replied. "Because in healthy families, people don't tell their children to get out and never come back unless they mean it." "Madison, please," he continued. "We love you. We miss you. This whole thing has gotten way out of hand." The declaration of love would have meant something if it had come before the mortgage inquiry, but the timing made it clear that their affection was directly tied to their financial needs. "How are things going financially?" I asked, already knowing the answer. The pause told me everything. "It's been challenging," he admitted. "We've fallen behind on some payments. The bank sent us a notice about foreclosure proceedings." "What about the money you saved by not having me around?" I asked. "You know, all those groceries I wasn't eating, utilities I wasn't using, space I wasn't taking up?" "It's not that simple," Richard said. "Your income was. We had adjusted our budget based on your contributions." Translation: they had spent 3 years living beyond their means because they knew I would cover the shortfall. "Can I talk to her?" I heard Patricia's voice in the background. "Madison, your mother wants to speak to you," Richard said. Patricia's voice came through the phone with forced sweetness that I remembered from my childhood when she wanted something from me. "Honey, we've been so worried about you," she began. "You left so suddenly, and we didn't know how to reach you. We didn't want to intrude if you needed space." The lie was so blatant that I almost laughed. They had my phone number, my work information, and Emma's contact details. If they had wanted to reach me for any reason other than money, they could have done so months ago. "We made mistakes that night," Patricia continued. "We said things in anger that we didn't mean. But you have to understand, we're family. Family works through problems together." "What problems are we working through?" I asked. "Well, this financial situation, for one thing," she said, dropping the pretense slightly. "We're facing foreclosure, Madison. We could lose the house." "Is that really what you want?" The emotional manipulation was exactly what Dr. Chen had warned me to expect. They were making their financial crisis my responsibility and my fault. "How much do you owe?" I asked. "We're 3 months behind on the mortgage," Richard said, getting back on the phone, "plus late fees and penalties. We need about $6,000 to get current." $6,000. 3 months of mortgage payments that they had expected me to cover despite telling me to leave and never come back. "What happened to the money you've been earning and saving without me around?" I asked. Another pause. "Patricia's hours were cut at work," Richard said. "And Lucas needed help with an unexpected expense for school." Of course, Lucas needed money. And of course, they had prioritized his needs over their mortgage payments, assuming I would eventually come back to fix their financial problems. "Madison," Patricia said, her voice taking on a pleading tone, "I know we hurt your feelings, but you can't punish the whole family because of one argument. This house has been in our family for 30 years. Lucas grew up here. This is our home." The house that she had specifically referred to as our house when she wanted to exclude me from decisions was now suddenly a family legacy that I was responsible for preserving. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm respecting your wishes. You told me to get out and never come back. You said you didn't need my guilt trips or my money. I believed you." "We were angry," Richard protested. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. You have to know we didn't want you to actually leave forever. Then what did you want? I asked. The silence stretched long enough that I knew they were realizing the trap in the question. They had wanted me to be properly chastised, to accept their criticism without defending myself, to continue paying their bills while accepting less respect and consideration. They had wanted the benefits of my financial support without the inconvenience of treating me like a valued family member. We want you to come home, Patricia finally said. We want our family back together. What would that look like? I asked. If I came back, what would be different? We'd treat you better, Richard said quickly. We'd be more appreciative. We'd make sure you felt valued. Empty promises designed to solve their immediate financial crisis. There was no acknowledgement of the specific ways they had hurt me, no understanding of why their behavior had been problematic, and no concrete plan for changing their attitudes. And if I can't move back right away, I asked. If I need time to think about it? Well, we'd need help with the mortgage situation regardless, Patricia said. Even if you're not ready to move back, surely you can help us avoid foreclosure. We're still family. There it was. The real ask. They wanted my money whether I came back or not. They wanted me to resume financial responsibility for their household while they decided whether they could tolerate my presence. I looked around the grocery store at other shoppers living their normal lives, making choices about dinner and weekend plans. I thought about my peaceful apartment, my growing savings account, my improving work performance, and my newfound sense of self-worth. I'll call you back, I said and hung up the phone. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I was going to say to my family, and I was finally ready to say it. I waited 2 days before calling my parents back, not because I needed time to make my decision, but because I wanted to be completely clear about my boundaries before I communicated them. I had spent too many years reacting to their demands instead of responding from a place of strength and clarity. When I finally called, Richard answered on the first ring. Madison, thank God, he said. We've been waiting to hear from you. I've made my decision, I said calmly. I won't be moving back home, and I won't be helping with the mortgage or any other financial obligations. The silence stretched so long that I wondered if the call had dropped. What do you mean? Patricia's voice came through the speaker, sharp with disbelief. I mean exactly what I said. I'm not coming back and I'm not sending money. But we explained that we didn't mean what we said that night, Richard protested. We were upset. We want you to come home. No, you don't, I replied. You want my money. If you wanted me, you would have called 3 months ago to apologize. You would have reached out when you realized you missed me, not when you realized you missed my financial contributions. That's not fair, Patricia said. We gave you space because we thought that's what you wanted. You gave me space because it was easier than admitting you were wrong, I corrected. And you only ended that space when you needed something from me. I could hear muffled conversation in the background. Then Richard spoke again. Madison, I understand you're hurt, but we're facing foreclosure. We could lose our home. Surely your anger isn't worth more than your family's security. The attempt to make me responsible for their crisis was exactly what I had expected, and I was ready for it. Your financial security is not my responsibility, I said. You told me I was manipulative for making myself necessary to your finances. You told me I was controlling for having opinions about money I contributed. You told me I was selfish for prioritizing my career advancement. So, I removed myself from your financial situation entirely. You're being vindictive, Patricia accused. You're punishing us for one argument. I'm not punishing anyone, I replied. I'm protecting myself from being taken advantage of again. You spent 3 years accepting my money while criticizing my character. You made me feel guilty for every personal purchase while expecting me to fund your wants and needs without question. That's not a relationship I'm willing to continue. But we're family, Richard said, his voice taking on a pleading tone I had never heard before. Yes, we are, I agreed. And families should support each other's growth, celebrate each other's achievements, and treat each other with respect. When did you last do any of those things for me? The question hung in the air unanswered because we all knew the truth. They couldn't remember the last time they had shown genuine interest in my happiness or success that didn't relate to their own benefit. We'll do better, Patricia promised. We'll change how we treat you. Just help us through this crisis and things will be different. You had 3 years to treat me better when I was contributing to your household, I said. You chose to take me for granted instead. I'm not giving you another opportunity to do the same thing. What about Lucas? Richard asked, playing what he clearly thought was his strongest card. He'll have to drop out of school if we lose the house. Do you want to ruin your brother's future? The emotional manipulation was so transparent that I felt insulted by his assumption that it would work on me. Lucas is 23 years old, I replied. He can take out student loans like millions of other college students. He can get a part-time job like I did. He can learn to support himself instead of depending on family money for his lifestyle. That's cruel, Patricia said. He shouldn't have to struggle because you're holding a grudge. It's not cruel to expect an adult to be financially responsible for himself, I said. It's not a grudge to refuse to enable a family that doesn't respect me. It's called having boundaries. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes with my parents alternating between guilt trips, empty promises, and subtle threats about what would happen to our family relationships if I didn't help them. I listened to all of it with a detachment that surprised me. Finally, I ended the call with words I had been preparing for days. I spent 3 years being your ATM while you criticized and dismissed me, I said. I sacrificed my social life, my career advancement, and my self-worth to keep you comfortable. You didn't appreciate it then, and you only miss it now because you need money. I'm not coming back to be taken for granted again. Madison, please, Richard tried one more time. You told me to get out and never come back, I continued. You said you didn't need my guilt trips or my money. I respected your wishes then, and I'm respecting them now. Don't contact me again unless you have something to say that doesn't involve asking for money. I hung up and immediately blocked their numbers. The relief I felt was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for anyone else's financial security, emotional well-being, or life choices. I was free to build a life based on my own values and priorities. 6 months later, I received a promotion at work that came with a significant salary increase. I moved into a beautiful one-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors and a balcony overlooking a small park. I started dating someone who appreciated my ambition and independence. I took a vacation to Italy with Emma, something I never could have afforded while supporting my family. Most importantly, I learned to value myself the way I had always valued others. I discovered that my worth wasn't determined by how much I could sacrifice or how many problems I could solve for other people. I was valuable simply because I existed, because I was kind and hardworking and thoughtful, not because I was useful. I never heard from my family again, which told me everything I needed to know about what I had really meant to them. Through social media, I learned that they had lost the house and moved into a smaller rental property. Lucas transferred to a community college and got a part-time job. My parents downsized their lifestyle significantly. I felt sadness about their struggles, but no guilt. They had made choices that led to their situation, and they would have to make choices to improve it. Those choices were not my responsibility. The most valuable lesson I learned was this: love should never require you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. True family supports your growth and celebrates your success rather than exploiting your loyalty and taking your sacrifices for granted. I thought being a good daughter meant sacrificing everything for family. But I learned that being a good daughter means respecting yourself enough to expect respect in return. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices, because that's the only way they learn to make better ones. I'm not ungrateful for what my family gave me growing up. I'm grateful for the strength I found to recognize when giving became enabling, when love became exploitation, and when loyalty became self-destruction. Walking away from my family was the hardest thing I ever did. But it was also the moment I finally learned to love myself. Today, I'm genuinely happy and free, surrounded by people who value me for who I am rather than what I can provide. I've learned that my worth isn't measured by how much I sacrifice for others, but by how well I honor my own value and maintain my boundaries. That's a lesson that changed everything for me. And I hope it might help someone else who's struggling with similar choices.